Let's talk about my favorite movie characters of all time. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris and welcome back to another video. So today I'm going through my top 10 favorite movie characters of all time. This is not my favorite fictional characters. There's no TV characters or book characters or video game characters. This list is exclusively characters from movies. But before I get into this thing, be sure to hit that like button. Comment down below your favorite movie characters of all time, as well as your thoughts on my list. Subscribe and hit that notification bell to help reach my goal of 100,000 subscribers here on the channel. It would mean a lot as I'm trying to make that final push. But with that being said, let's dive into this list. This is just how I'm feeling in this moment in time. This list is probably ever changing, though as we get closer to the top 3 or 4, those are more set in stone or concrete. But kicking this list off at number 10, I've got Ben Gates, the main character from the National Treasure films, played by none other than Nick Cage. I just love these movies so much growing up, and if you followed the channel for any time, I gush about National Treasure any chance I can get. And so watching these films growing up, I was infatuated with the idea of, oh my gosh, there's a treasure map on the back of the Declaration of Independence. I literally had the DVD, the special edition version, where you could do this treasure hunt and decode everything to find the treasure on your own. And as a 4 or 5-year-old kid, I was just mind blown by this. So of course I was going to fall in love with the main character, Ben Gates. I liked history a lot growing up. I feel like this movie actually plays a big role in that. So the fact that he was a history buff, but also just a cool dude who pulls off this heist to getting the Declaration of Independence and goes on this treasure hunt, not only in one movie, but in 2 movies, I was all in. And then you throw in the fact that Nick Cage just fully commits to this role. I love it. It's one of his more tame roles in retrospect. Like, I look at all of his filmography, and it's definitely like, on the Nick Cage scale, he's not full-on Nick Cage insanity. He's toned back a bit, but he still gives us those great one-liners and is a easy-to-root-for main character. The scenes of him just explaining history and how this insane scenario could actually be feasible, it just works for me. And of course, he gives us this line.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
At number 9 on my list is the youngest character on this list by far, and that is Kevin McAllister from Home Alone. It's no secret, if you know me, that Home Alone is my number 1 favorite Christmas movie ever, and growing up, I would watch this movie year-round. I would just take it, we had a portable DVD player, and on road trips, I would watch Home Alone in the car. Even if it was like June or September, I would just be in a Home Alone mood, because it's that good of a movie. I think John Williams' score plays a big part in that, of course, Chris Columbus' direction, but Macaulay Culkin's performance is outstanding, especially for a kid actor. I think it's one of the stronger kid acting performances of all time because of how funny this character is. Like, Kevin McAllister starts out as this kid who wants nothing to do with his family. He's like, I wish they'd disappear. And then the power goes out, he's left behind, obviously, and then over the course of the movie, he's living every kid's dream. You're home alone. You can eat all the junk food you want, do anything, watch anything on TV, and it was just, like, so cool to watch as a kid, this kid and Kevin McAllister doing his thing, but he discovers that he's sort of lonely and maybe he didn't, cherish his family in the way he needed to. Obviously, the main plot of this movie is that these 2 burglars, Marv and Harry, end up trying to break into his house, and he's got to defend it, and so he sets up all these booby traps for them. But he's just such a lovable main kid. I think he's relatable when you're a kid and you watch this movie. You're like, I wish I was Kevin McAllister, being able to kick these guys' ass, just eat ice cream. I mean, come on, it's the kid's dream, right? But he gives us some great one-liners in here as well. Of course, in retrospect, it'd be a horrifying situation, but as a kid, you're glorifying it, sledding down your stairs out into the snow. It's like, who wouldn't want to do that when you're, 9 years old? So I always loved Home Alone. I still do. I can't wait to watch it this upcoming December. But Kevin McAllister is the heart and soul of this movie, and his relationship with the old man never fails to, bring a little tear to my eye near the end. It's just super sweet, and it reminds you to value your family and your relationships, especially around the holiday season, and Kevin McAllister is the guiding light through Home Alone. I can't help but have him on this list. But coming in at number 8, I've got Gary Bertier. This is one of the main characters from Remember the Titans. One of those movies, again, that I gush about pretty much every chance I get. It is a sports film starring Denzel Washington, and it's one of those Disney based on true story sports films. It just hits different from like the early 2000s. And Gary Bertier is one of the linebackers for the football team, and he is a leader. He's the captain of this team. Now, the plot of this film is that T.C. Williams High School is the first school in that area to integrate, meaning both black and white students go to the same school, they end up playing on the same football team, and Gary Bertier is a leader, and he ends up forming this relationship with Julius, another linebacker, as they have to work together. They're both on defense, and they become brothers throughout the course of the film. And it's really honestly tragic what happens at the end. I won't say, if you guys haven't seen, you gotta go watch this movie. But the way that he's just a leader is awesome. He gives out multiple like quotes that just send chills down your spine. You can't help but love him. And then of course Julius is like his right hand man. They're like Batman and Robin, or even Batman and Superman, I would argue. So they are both definitely in contention for the spot. But I settled on Gary Bertier just because, you know, he is like the face of this team. And of course, Remember the Titans is one of my favorite movies, so I had to get one of the Titans themselves on this list. The actor who plays him actually is in like The Walking Dead and Sons of Anarchy, shows I've never seen, but his most memorable and iconic role to me will always be Gary Bertier. You gotta have him on this list. But coming in at number 7, I've got Rocky, the Italian stallion himself. This is, I think, Stallone's most iconic performance. Obviously, the first Rocky won Best Picture and all those Oscars for a reason. It launched that whole entire franchise. But that movie is a classic, and it's the ultimate underdog story. Rocky's just such a likable dude, you know? He's not the smartest when it comes to, like, book smarts, but street smarts, he's pretty alright, and he will hang with you in a fight. You can't help but root for him and his relationship with Adrian, but also just this underdog story of him going and fighting Apollo Creed on the biggest stage in the world. So you can't help but relate to him. I think he's definitely one of the most relatable movie characters in terms of being like the everyday guy who gets this 1 in a million shot to go prove it and make a name for himself. So Rocky had to be on this list. I mean, if you're 10, 12 years old and you watch this movie for the first time, it could change your perspective on a lot of things. I remember when I first watched it, I immediately wanted to go lift weights, get a punching bag, go for a run. Like, Rocky had to be on this list. It's Stallone's best role and one of, if not the most iconic characters in cinema. We can debate that in the comments down below. But coming in at number 6, I've got Forrest Gump. When it comes to iconic movie characters, this guy's got to be pretty high up there. Won Tom Hanks an Oscar for a reason. The story of Forrest Gump is just so awesome. It's literally this guy's life, and it's like the way they insert him into historical events is really neat. Like, the visual effects were probably ahead of their time. In fact, they absolutely were. They were inserting him into interviews with people, with, you know, JFK, with John Lennon. It's impressive what they do here, and the emotional journey you go on following Forrest's life is just awesome. You can't help but fall in love with this character. The movie's funny, it's charming, it'll make you tear up at the end with, you know, Jenny and Forrest's mom. But Forrest Gump he's full of life. He, you know, makes you happy at times. The way that he's like just not ashamed to be himself, and he doesn't even realize that he's being hilarious, is awesome. Like, Tom Hanks just plays this role so well, and I was running. Alright, so getting us into the top 5, I've got Doc Brown from Back to the Future. Now, I could have gone Marty McFly and almost wanted to put them in here as a duo and cheat, but I ended up going with Doc Brown just because I feel like he is the most memorable character from this entire franchise. He's this mad scientist in a way, but he's a genius. He creates the flux capacitor, which he puts in the DeLorean, which allows for time travel. His antics in this movie and just his spastic nature is so hilarious at times, and his quotes too, God, they get me. 1.21 gigawatts, great Scott, Marty, we're gonna mess up the space-time continuum. He just goes on rants in this film, and Christopher Lloyd's facial expressions are effortlessly hilarious. Like, he is doing the most in the best possible way. Doc Brown, I think, is the best character from the trilogy. I know that might be a hot take because a lot of people might say Marty, but give me Doc any day of the week. He's the most quotable, and if you can quote a character, they're probably one of the better characters, so that's why he's high up on this list. Had to represent Back to the Future, easily one of the most rewatchable movies ever crafted. But now we're getting into the top 4. This is where things are getting real. The top 4 are comfortably set for me. Like, this, I could have just made a top 4 video because I know them the best, and they're easily my favorite characters, and it was hard, but, you know, it's like picking between kids. I don't have kids, I don't have pets, but it's like picking between them if you got them. I don't know, people say that all the time. But here we go. Number 4, Han Solo. Played by Harrison Ford, also Alden Ehrenreich, but, you know, it's Harrison Ford. We all think Harrison when we think of Han. So this is the coolest smuggler in the entire Star Wars universe. The way that he just blows away Greedo and then tips the bartender, sorry about the mess. I mean, I was like, damn, this is the king of cool right here in the Star Wars universe. That's how I feel about him through the entire original trilogy. Obviously, he ends up falling in love with Leia, and they have the whole I love you, I know moment. He's got his heroic moment at the end of A New Hope. But I just love that character arc for Han. He's this cool, like too cool for school dude in a way, with a lot of charisma and charm. And it seems like he's brushing off his friends. I'm just here for the credits. But at the end of the day, he ends up coming back, helping out Luke in destroying the Death Star. Great shot, kid, that was 1 in a million. Gives me chills every single time. So Han went from being, you know, that hotshot, too cool for school kind of guy, to coming back, saving his friends, and ultimately falling in love with Princess Leia. Now, over the course of the rest of the trilogy, he's a great right-hand man. He's still got that cocky attitude, and, you know, he's got those sarcastic one-liners. Those are just synonymous with Han Solo, that personality trait. He's a lovable Star Wars character, and man, is he too cool for school in the best possible way. At number 3 on my list, I've got Iron Man, played by Robert Downey Jr. in the MCU. Tony Stark's character arc, to me, is probably the best in the entire cinematic universe. He goes from being this super cocky, you know, selfish guy, it's all about him, to ultimately making the sacrifice play, something Steve Rogers told him he would never do. Well, he does that in Avengers Endgame as he snaps away Thanos and his army and saves humanity. Tony's a genius in the MCU, you know, he creates all these suits. It's hard not to be drawn to that spectacle that he is. He's just got that swag and, you know, that suave nature to him where you can't help but be like, damn, this guy is the coolest guy around, and it's not even up for debate. Of course, he's a sarcastic asshole, but he makes me laugh in those scenes when he's throwing jokes at Steve Rogers or Thor and tossing around these insults. Like, that adds to the charm for me. And I've always just found Tony as like the funniest character in the MCU, but also my favorite by a long shot. He's got a great character arc. Without Tony, the MCU feels empty in a way. Like, he carries that much screen presence and was so pivotal to the early phases of the MCU. It wouldn't be the same without RDJ as Tony Stark, and no one else could ever play the role as good as him. My runner-up is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, there's 2 versions of this character, one played by Sir Alec Guinness in A New Hope, and one played by Ewan McGregor, and both are perfect. Obviously, Sir Alec Guinness did it first, and he gives so much wisdom to Luke. He's a fantastic mentor to him throughout that film, and even through the Force and, you know, Empire and Return of the Jedi, Obi-Wan is always there for Luke when he really needs him. Hello there. That's a name I haven't heard in a long time. He's got so many awesome lines. Like, Sir Alec Guinness's line delivery essentially allowed us to picture the entire prequel trilogy before it was ever even written. He creates that much mystery about Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship and the Jedi. Like, he killed it. And then, of course, most people think of Ewan McGregor when they think Obi-Wan, and that's totally fine because he rules as well. He had the whole prequel trilogy, of course, the Obi-Wan show, but in Revenge of the Sith specifically, Obi-Wan is amazing. He's got the look down, of course, he's got the same energy, but he adds that youthfulness to it. Obviously, Sir Alec Guinness is playing Obi-Wan near the end of his life, and Ewan McGregor gets to play him in an earlier phase in life. So what I love so much about Obi-Wan is that I think he's the most pure Jedi at heart. He's just got a good heart. He cares for Anakin. He cares deeply for everyone, and he is just the ultimate hero. To me, he's the best Jedi in the entire Star Wars universe. He's cool as hell, obviously, with the line delivery and the mustache, the hair. You can't help but love the look, but he is a badass Jedi Master who I would not want to get in a duel with, I'll tell you that much. He gains so much wisdom over the course of the prequels that by the time you go back and rewatch, you know, the original film, he's like at his all-time form as a master. He becomes one with the Force ultimately. You gotta love Obi-Wan. He's my runner-up, but my number 1 is Indiana Jones. It was always going to be Indiana Jones. Look, when we're talking coolest movie characters of all time, you got to throw Indy in the conversation. Harrison Ford played both Han Solo and Indiana Jones. Those are his 2 most iconic roles, but Indy edges it out for me. Indiana Jones is this dude that everyone wanted to be growing up. I literally had the hat and whip, would go to my backyard and create these scenarios where I have to find this artifact that I hid somewhere in the yard, and I would like escape through the booby traps and everything. Like, I idolized Indiana Jones growing up, and he's just the king of cool. And I don't think anyone else could play this role as well as Harrison Ford. Like, the way that he just has that charisma, again, the sarcastic one-liners, but also the smarts where he's got this expansive knowledge about all these artifacts, whether they be religious or not. I mean, he knows so much, and he always uses that when he goes out and tries to find these different artifacts. Of course, you get a little origin of him with River Phoenix playing the character in Last Crusade, giving us even more depth to him, but we get to see this character throughout all the different phases of his life. Of course, in the original trilogy, he is at like the peak and going on these adventures, but then even in Crystal Skull, we get to see a more wiser, seasoned Indiana Jones, and even in Dial of Destiny, we see an Indy who's retiring as a professor and thinking about like, what do I have left to offer in life? We see the full spectrum of this man's life, and it's done beautifully. Harrison Ford is an icon, and this is his best role to me. This is a character that I've wanted to be for years, and I think a lot of people out there can relate. He's got the iconic silhouette. Like, if you throw up a shadow of Indiana Jones on the wall, 9 out of 10 people are going to be able to tell you, oh yeah, that's Indy. You got John Williams' score and everything, but this is like the face of adventure. Indiana Jones was always going to be number 1. But yeah, that does it for my top 10 favorite movie characters of all time at this very moment in time. Again, this list could always change as I watch more movies or whatever. You guys know. If you want to see me do this with all of fiction, let me know in the comments down below. But be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to help reach my goal of 100,000 subscribers here on the channel. It would mean a lot. Check out the podcast, link down below, and as always, stay tuned for more content coming very soon. But until next time, I'll see you guys later.